So I'm very happy to be speaking to Vince Jeong today. Vince is the co-founder and CEO at Sparkwise, a corporate learning company that is reinventing skills training to enable captivating and interactive online learning at scale. Thank you for joining us, Vince.
Thanks, Luigi, for having me.
So first of all, could you please explain what Sparkwise is?
Sparkwise is a multiplayer skill building platform. We immerse professionals into these interactive group challenges that facilitate real-time practice, feedback, and human connection.
So you use the word multiplayer. I'm imagining like a very gamified approach. Is that what you're trying to convey?
That's a great question. I think we differentiate gamified and game-based. So our experiences are by nature highly interactive group experiences, a little bit inspired by things like board games or escape rooms, essentially where you are given a challenge to solve as a team. It's less like the gamified where you get points and stuff like that. We do have plans to enable those in the future, but that's not the core of what our multiplayer looks like.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about the skills that you're training for and how you do that?
Yeah, so it's all sorts. I mean, when we first started Sparkwise, we began with helping people practice pretty general professional business skills, right? Things like communication, problem solving, collaboration, project management, and so on, and leadership, right? And that's where we have some of our own proprietary content that companies can buy and offer to their employees at any time. But we're also starting to partner with companies that have distinctive expertise in certain areas that they want to either train internally or train their customers. And we also help them transform those content into our very interactive, like real-time group format.
Okay, so how does this collaboration come out? Like, tell us a little bit about the process of understanding what customers might need. How are your general customers? Like, what does your most common kind of customer look like, and how does the process unfold?
Are you talking about them using our platform to like use our content and like how the interactive collaboration feels like?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so when so let me know if I'm answering the question. But like my sense is when we start engaging with a customer, it's because they typically have a certain set of skills that they want to really teach their teams, but don't have a great way of doing that at scale. And they understand that for people to learn skills, it's really effective when you do it together and give each other feedback and really deeply engage, right? Because learning is effortful by default. If you want to really build skills, you can't just sit there and just passively consume. You have to engage with it. And so, from our buyer perspective, it's pretty simple. They look at our catalog of lists, which at this point we have 100 plus different, very granular skills they can teach their teams. Each of these skills are delivered in 1 hour chunks, which means it sits on their team's calendar for a 1 hour meeting slot, at which point their team members join our platform. And each of these sessions engage anywhere from 2 to 5 people, interactively solving challenges guided by our platform. One of my challenges like maybe gives you a simulated problem solving. It makes you create something and share with each other and give each other real-time feedback. It gives this high-level discussion prompt that makes people reflect their own life and bring their own perspective to it. These kinds of different kinds of activities. But essentially, the platform really guides people to learn from and with each other.
I understand. Can we grasp perhaps a little bit more of the details of the structure of these 1 hour sessions?
Yeah. So I would say the common structure is the following. Usually there's some introductory video that sets the motivation, right? Why does this skill matter in your workplace? Then people join video, and then now you're going to be in an environment that you can see your colleagues on the screen, and there's like a workspace in the middle with like elements that guides people through the session. And we typically guide people through a series of exercises that take them from, okay, well, introduce yourself because you just got on video, and then say, what are problems you notice in the workplace when this skill doesn't exist, which makes them really reflect on why this matters further. Mm-hmm. Then we usually give a very quick overview of the skill you're going to learn today, but in a very distilled format, without too much explanation. And then we go straight into giving them multiple reps of practicing that skill in different scenarios and applying it to their own life. And very much at the core of that is we don't just tell you what great looks like. We're going to help you discover what good looks like by trying things out yourself, seeing where your intuition falls short, seeing what great looks like from each other and from us, which then gets you to go, oh, wow, I could have done that so differently. I sort of know what the gap is and where I should have improved. And so we have those multiple reps of cycle. And at the end, we usually have a wrap up sort of synthesis of the skill that you learned, as well as an opportunity for people to write down what their main takeaways and reflections are, which then we send it back to them after a few days.
Right. So this structure is confirming something that I do have to disclose. I do already know about you, being a Zanichelli Venture portfolio company, but this being the embedding of learning sciences within what you've built at Sparkwise. It's quite clear to me from hearing the structure that goes into the 1 hour sessions, both speaking about like starting off with a reflection on what is the importance of a certain skill in the company and how do things look like if that skill isn't there. Could you tell me a little bit about how learning sciences are informing, perhaps taking one example, if you'd like, the choices that you're making in the structure that you're giving to Sparkwise?
Yeah. Maybe I can answer that by first explaining why learning science is so core to us, and some examples of learning science informing our structure. Learning science is really important for us because of where our founders come from. We are a team of ex-McKinsey and Minerva folks. And so what does that mean in real life? Why do I think learning science really supports that? So if you think about McKinsey, at its core, it's actually really a people transformation business. And changing people's skills, mindsets, and behaviors are very deeply ingrained into the organization, right? Both externally, like, when McKinsey serves clients, the real success is if the clients are able to embrace the kind of change and work in a different way as a result of McKinsey engaging with them. And also internally, McKinsey takes a lot of new grads and then turns them into C-suite ready professionals very quickly, and it's very core to their model. I was a beneficiary of that. I really actually say McKinsey was the best university I've attended, right? I feel like they took me from the shy sort of young professional into the person that I'm today. And they have this incredible, very interactive workshop-like format that they often do, both with clients and internally, to help you develop. And it's been extremely effective. A lot of my McKinsey alumni friends say training is one of their favorite parts about McKinsey as well. And so I feel like I've deeply seen what great adult skill development looks like, but it's pretty expensive to scale in its normal format. It's heavily facilitated. But so one is like my direct experience, like going through some of these great training that I personally would develop from. Minerva is one of our third co-founder, Ari, is from Minerva. And it's very well known for bringing active learning into the classroom in different environments. And so as somebody who's really tried to build active learning into technology, he has very good intuition of, oh, if we have this kind of pedagogical need, how would you bring that to life in a sort of a technical setting? And being able to experiment very quickly with new modalities of learning and always asking questions, is this actually going to help people, learners, engage, and so on? And so because of our backgrounds, learning science and great learning experiences are very much at the core of why we started Sparkwise. So more specifically, how does that really play out in like our experience design? It's kind of similar to what I think I used to do when I was developing a lot of workshops for clients at McKinsey, or when one of my co-founders used to be in McKinsey's people function. He built and led some of the training programs there, what they really think about, which is how do you get people motivated and excited to learn, but also give them meaningful practice, right? And so, a good example of a pedagogical sort of concept we use is the concept of productive failure, which is people, especially adults, bring a lot of experiences. It's really helpful for them to see, like, try things out and see where they fall short and make it a bit experimental, right? By doing that, you increase their willingness to learn and then absorb the content that are given to you. A lot of things in the workplace today, I think it's very easy for professionals to say, I already know that stuff. I already know how to write emails. I do that all day. But then when you go through some of our sessions around communication, they try that and realize, wow, my emails have a lot of room to improve, and we help people get to that kind of realization. So that's an example of sort of how learning science plays through. Maybe I'll highlight one more thing that's very core: multiplayer. Why do we care about multiplayer? It's because we believe learning is inherently social, especially for adults, and that's a very deep belief we have in the science of adult learning. And so it's very core to our product, and it's what we've really built around, like everything we do.
I think something I have to recognize as well, on top of your kind of basis in learning sciences applied in online learning, is also, I think, quite a natural understanding of slick user interface and user experience design. I think even just taking a look at Sparkwise, it's kind of like it jumps out, it stands out as visually intuitive and visually like gratifying to look at. But this is also a principle of learning design. I was wondering whether this kind of like touches upon some topics that are dear to you in how you've structured or how you're structuring Sparkwise learning experiences for team members who jump on and perhaps are shown some material, and then are from there they take on the learning session. Does this bring like something that you've noticed either in your previous experience? How is it that you've given so much importance to user interface, user design, user experience design?
Yeah. I think it again ties to learning science and making learning highly impactful. There are a couple, I think, of thinking that informs our user experience design and user interface. The first thing is the user interface and experience can't get in the way of learning. If you think about learning, people are being presented new information that they have to process. And we know there's a sweet spot in which people are very excited to learn, they feel challenged enough. But if you give them too many things that are hard to navigate, they become overwhelmed and actually become demotivated. Yeah. And so a lot of our user experiences, how do we simplify the actual navigation elements and so on so that people can fully immerse themselves in the user experience, right? And I would say, it closely mimics what the role of a facilitator is in a group learning environment. If you think about a facilitator, they guide you on the steps and the logistics and everything such that you can just focus on the content. You don't have to worry about like everything else. And in many ways, our technology tries to do that. I think the second thing is, to your point, I think bits of delight, sleek interface helps people stay engaged and motivated. This is not the primary reason for making it very beautiful, I would say, in our mind, but I think it certainly helps with the kind of the impression and their the fact that they feel like they're having fun. And so that's the second piece that really informs our design.
Yeah, sure. And I think kind of hinting to some business side questions, hinting to the questions about what you feel your competition is. I was kind of thinking about how does Sparkwise differ from, you've touched upon this already to some extent, but how does it differ from what's out there already, both on the side of captivating but unscalable solutions, or scalable but less captivating solutions?
Yeah, I like your use of the word captivating. Yeah, so I think you're exactly right. When we mapped out the landscape and try to decide why do we need to exist, it really was us sort of landing at a conclusion that a lot of corporate learning solutions fall into these two buckets, as you said. So let's first talk about captivating but unscalable solutions. They're often, so the things that fall under that category are like live classes, coaching solutions by experts, right? Or, a lot of companies have a large group of trainers that they have in-house that deliver workshops and so on. The reason why they are hard to scale is that, these expert trainers are they're scarce, they're hard to find, hard to schedule, and necessarily this human component makes it hard for it to be truly scalable like a software solution. And that's honestly, I would say, if I look at the corporate training market, that is most of the spend, right? That's where the dollars are going. On the other side are the e-learning solutions we've seen pop up over the years. Many of them universally seem to have this problem of low engagement and like low completion. So they range from sort of online self-paced modules to, in the flow of work nudging kind of technology, right? But they essentially are these like software solutions that have no human in the loop. Yeah. And the issue there is that then, is there enough motivation for the learner to really engage and learn from it beyond just like rote content consumption? And so for us was, how do you bring the level of impact of the facilitated live learning where people are encouraged to really engage and grapple with the content, with the scalability of these e-learning V1 kind of companies. And that's where we saw an opportunity to really help in the market.
Yeah, right. I do wonder though whether you think there is someone on the market who's probably your competitor, who is to some good extent captivating and to some extent scalable. And if
Yeah, I mean, for sure, I think it's like a spectrum, right? Definitely. I mean, I would say though that if I think about our positioning in the market and how we think about growth, I actually see a lot of training providers as a complement and not a competitor to us. What do I mean by that? We have a very particular opinionated learning modality, which often can complement existing suite of solutions that people offer. To date, I still have not seen kind of a multiplayer skill building platform like the way we do, where you don't have an instructor and pedagogically we guide them through. I still have not seen that. So from a modality perspective, we're quite unique, but we're solving a similar problem that many other companies are solving. So if you think about just the corporate training market, obviously there are a lot of competitors. But we, as we go into more of a platform direction where we allow other companies to embed our technology into their existing solutions and help their learners really succeed, we see opportunity to serve a lot of other learning providers who otherwise would have considered as competitive. In fact, we have a number of them already as customers that we're starting to work with, right? So as we move into more of these like partnership play, I think about competitive market quite differently in the learning space as it relates to us.
Yeah, and talking about how you're building the trainings now, there's several, well, quite a lot of trainings that can be visualized on your website as well, that are readily available to your customers. But then there's ongoing development, yet this development is not necessarily directly solely from your team's side, if my understanding is correct. So what is your vision for your business development in terms of what the building of trainings is going to look like in time?
Like you mean on our platform?
Yes.
Yeah. So the vision is that we have an authoring tool that others can use, which helps them author content in our platform quickly and easily at a high quality, right? The analogy I would make is Webflow. If you think about Webflow, it's a very opinionated website building platform. And it's structured in a way that actually it's pretty hard for you to make a really bad looking website at this point, because they put a lot of guardrails around it, right? For you to make something good. Like that's kind of the principle that we have, right? Many people are not learning experience experts.
Yeah.
It's not a very widely understood skill, but the people who have a lot of these knowledge and insight that they want to share with more people, need to be able to create learning experiences without having to invest years to become a learning experience designer, right? And so I think our tool would help people do that. So that's sort of the vision. And so what are we doing now? We're really thinking about how do we today take content and shape it into our format. What are the steps? Like, what's our thinking process, and how do we use the various tools that are available, including generative AI, which I think is a real breakthrough in being able to do this, so that we can author content a lot faster.
Yeah. Speaking about users who then build the learning experience on the platform, would you say you're already at the stage in which the user building the learning experience on your platform, being an expert in learning sciences or someone with no background at all in learning sciences, would make no difference at all at this stage already in the kind of experience that they're building? Or would you say you've made it such that it's possible for a user who is not an expert to do that, but a learning sciences expert would still be able to add some additional value, and it's perhaps your vision to make it such that that is not necessary at all? Kind of, can you navigate this kind of like a question I've chucked at you right now?
Yeah, I think we're much the latter still, where, by the way, our authoring tool right now is still mostly internally facing, right? So we work with organizations who want to take their content into our format, and we very much work hand in hand with them. So in some sense, that part of our product is in like this design partnership stage, right? We're trying to define like what is most helpful to them and so on. Right. So very much we're still discovering what is the thing that allows non-learning experience design expert to be able to turn content into our format. I have some hypothesis that we're starting to test, but nothing concrete, I would say, is the sort of the solution yet.
Yes. Since you're at a stage in which you're working with your customers and trying to really understand what is the best solution for them, I kind of have a question that might be very interesting to fellow startuppers, EdTech startuppers regarding design cycles. How are you approaching this kind of cycle in which you take in information about like what the best usage is for your customers, you adapt the platform, and then you iterate and try to give a new solution and then redesign. How are these design cycles internally structured amongst yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're pretty early in this stage, so our thinking might evolve. But I would say, we basically find partners who want to actually build something on our platform. And so it first started by us just being able to outline more clearly what are the steps that are needed for you to take that content and give it to us, and for us to turn it into a format in our format, right? And so first of all, was like really figuring out what those steps are. And now I think we have a pretty clear idea of that. And the second is actually starting to take pieces of those steps and starting to productize them. So it's not that we like take those steps, do version one that's entirely on person. Here you go, and they give us feedback. It's more like pieces, whether it be, oh, you give us a few kind of learning objectives or insights, and we'll create an outline, right? Or like something like that, right? Or you give us these kinds of outlines, and let's create artifacts, right? And starting to experiment and productize and see how much they help and how much time it reduces on our side to then help them get it to the next level is how we are starting to experiment.
You mentioned about the compatibility of your solution with other solution providers and the complementarity of it rather than the competitive aspect of it. So I'm thinking about what your vision is in that sense, as to perhaps, for example, educational data mining that can happen on the Sparkwise platform. I assume from your stage, this might be a part that is in the backlog of features that you might want to implement in Sparkwise, but have you already put some thinking into this and into LTI compatibility in order to pass on data mined in the Sparkwise experience to learning management systems and so on?
Yeah, so it's not something we've directly started to tackle as a high priority, but definitely it's something we think about, right? So the conversation we typically have with different partners is, what is the data that you need from us and we need from you, right? And we try to avoid the conversation of like, oh, let's give like as much data possible on all of these things, like because they are required, they're available in typical learning platforms. But it's much more like, what data would make either our partner themselves or their customers and employees actually work differently. And we try to work a little bit backwards on that data, in part because the amount of data we can actually generate on our platform is quite wide varying, right? Because it's live group experience that is contained in our platform, which means there's a lot of engagement, interaction information we're able to pull from that. And so it's the very typical data science issue of, okay, we have lots of data we could generate, but let's form hypothesis and the right things before we start sending all this data, versus we have a whole bunch of data, let's do all this analysis, right? And you sort of get into this analysis paralysis situation.
Right. Yeah, not a great situation to be stuck in. Yeah, the space of educational data mining is such a novel space at the end of the day that it's quite normal that these are features that might be coming up, but these can potentially be at least some data can be very useful for companies. I wonder whether you've already identified some key aspects that your customers are really keen to understand better about their employees, and that you've perhaps repetitively heard from customers saying, like, I'd like to know about this, what happened during the training session.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few levels. It's, first of all, people still actually do want to know, was everyone engaged, right? And like, did everyone really sort of take it seriously?
Of course.
I think engagement has been a really long-standing problem of learning software, so I totally get it, right? So we're able to provide information on that. I think the second one is, this is a hard problem, and we think about how do we get at this. And I don't think we have a perfect solution yet, but I think we have some hypothesis around it, which is how do you actually measure people really mastered the thing that was being taught, right? This is, I think, something that I haven't really seen any real like learning software or corporate learning solutions truly, you know, figure it out, because it's a difficult problem. And so
The
I think,
soft skill area, especially.
yeah, exactly. When it's not like, and we don't really believe, at least my perspective right now, I don't believe in the quizzing as the solution for this
No.
in the adult learning space, right? And so I think there's, oftentimes there's curiosity around it by customers that they know that they can't really get that anywhere else. So, but they're like, oh, how do you think about that, right? And so I would say those two areas come to my mind.
So you've offered your solutions up until now. I know you are US based. How about your team? Where is your team based?
Yeah, we are very much a remote company. Our team is distributed across, parts of the US, Canada. We also have folks from Latin America as well. So all kind of in this North American, or just America's time zone, I guess more. But we very much built around remote work as a core company way of working.
How are you finding that?
There's definitely pros and cons. I personally really value remote work. I think it provides us an opportunity to work with really diverse talent from all the different places, and gives people flexibility. But I think obviously some of the difficulties of remote work also is something that we actively think about, right? One is like connectivity. How do we ensure that everyone feels like they really belong in this organization? Second is, I think as a remote company, you really have to focus on making your teams want to work at your place. It's not like about butts and seats and monitoring. Like that's not how you motivate folks to really contribute. And so we think a lot about how do we craft the roles and work in a way that people really are energized to do their work, and there's constant work involved there. And we have many different practices, I would say, we've put into our company over time to try to make this work.
Such as?
So one example is, core to our company's operations is company offsites. We run them every 3 to 4 months, and they're very intentionally designed, where we come together. Part of it is really strategic sessions where people come out feeling, wow, I have a clear vision of what our priorities are and where we're heading and why. Some parts of it are around way of working. What are the things in our company that's not quite working well? Can we reflect together in how we can better work together? Some of the sessions are around what are activities that gets us to know each other much more deeply, have vulnerable conversations. Some of the activities are, let's just work together side by side, right? And so I think there's these different elements that we really intentionally designed the agenda. And, from what I hear, all of our teammates walk away from it each time feeling quite energized. And I think it replenishes the empathy you need to succeed together when you're remote.
So you have a team that is spread out through the Americas time zones. How about your customers? Are you principally targeting customers from North America, perhaps some South America, or are you targeting customers all over the world?
Yeah, we have customers all over the world, really, right now, largely focused on English-speaking countries. Although we actually have certain organizations that have employees based in other regions, and therefore we've done targeted translation of content with them. But as a remote-first company, I think that's kind of a luxury as well. Oh, as an online learning company as well, that's kind of the luxury where our customers can really be based anywhere.
Would you feel comfortable telling us about a concrete use case of SparkMind with one of your customers, and perhaps, since you're still in this design phase, well, design never ends, of course, but earlier design stages, how the rapport with them developed in how you were adapting the solution, if you were taking a use case in which you did some adaptation throughout the delivery of the solution to your customer.
Yeah. So let me first talk about the core primary sort of go-to-market motion, which is, hey, we have a library of sessions, you can buy them and construct them. And then the secondarily, the platform use case, right, where we take their content. And so in the primary one, I think there are maybe three that I can highlight. One is ongoing professional development skills training needed in a team because they are facing a certain skills gap today, and the leader just has observed it, right? So it's irrelevant to the employee's journey in their company. It's just like, hey, let's do it together now, like, on a regular basis. Second is employee onboarding, or new hire onboarding, where we've had companies infuse Sparkwise sessions into like a boot camp or an onboarding period that rapidly upskills. Like, these are the skills every employee needs to learn, and we're going to do it through Sparkwise session. And the third is training employees in major transitions in their work experience. Like, a very classic one is when they become from an IC to a manager, and they roll out a training program through Sparkwise. On the platform side, it's quite it's honestly quite varied, right? And so it typically tends to be, it's whatever the thing the company is it's like a top priority for them to scale in an organization, and they're having trouble scaling it. I would say that's often the case. So let me give you an example. We have a client who's a fast-growing company in healthcare delivery, right? And they have a very particular model of serving their patients, and their clinical staff needs to learn a very specific model of delivery. And so, they have some onboarding experiences where whenever new staff gets hired, they get to learn this model up front. But they need like reinforcements that allow people to really internalize and digest what it means to deliver this service sort of at a high quality. So we've worked with them to take their sort of model itself, but then really understand what are the points of the model that requires reinforcement, because you frequently see gap between what great looks like and what typically happens, right? And we created reinforcement modules to help them train their teams at the right intervals. That is quite particular. It's not quite onboarding, it's not quite like transition, but it's the thing that for the organization is really important people need to master. And that's where we decided to support. And this is a typical conversation we have today when we work with a customer who want to take their content and sort of transform it into our format. We say, okay, let's be 80-20. Like, what is the 20% of the content that if you actually really, or 20% of the skills that would have an 80% impact on the day-to-day? And let's figure out why there's a gap between what you think highest performers do and others don't. And let us distill that and help people practice with that. Right.
And this adaptation you made in this case of your healthcare provider customer, is this an adaptation that then I think you were saying it's repeated then in practice at Sparkwise with other customers? But did this entail an actual difference on the platform that can be seen, or is it more on the side of like the learning experience and not necessarily on the graphic design of the platform?
Yeah, largely only sort of the actual learning content itself, right? There are other customers that we're in conversations with or doing pilots with, where there may be a little bit more of a branding update to show that we're co-branded and so on, right? And so those are things that we also think about. But our platform direction is relatively new, and the customers that have signed on to work with us so far have really been like, first of all, let's just really get the content in this format. We really love the off-the-shelf sort of pre-built content you have. We want to build it in our format and help us get there first and foremost.
So at this stage, you've helped them like hand by hand, let's say, to kind of do that. But how far do you think you are from a stage in which they're going to be able to do that completely independently for, let's say, the great majority of your customers?
It's hard for me to really estimate like a precise timeline, but I think that's a pretty non-trivial technical innovation and build. So it's not something that's going to come in the next quarter or anything like that. But it's a kind of one of our big high priority, almost like it's almost like a new product. It's not even really a feature that's in our roadmap coming after the current stage, which is where like really we've really worked on making the current UX, UI, and stability up to like a consumer grade scale.
Yeah. And it's, of course, quite normal at this stage of your of your startup to be doing this hand by hand with customers, but this is what is building the building blocks to enable an automated service that then brings down the price point, of course, compared to competition. I'm wondering, on the marketing side, you've spoken about how you do not go through sales to learning departments, but you've chosen another marketing strategy. Could you tell us a little bit more about this and why?
Yeah, so I mean, we have certain organizations where we end up speaking with, the learning and development teams first, which we're happy to do. But typically in our direct outreach, we usually look to connect with the business executive who has a skill need. And the reason is that we've seen that sort of like urgency of business need drive to a more like sort of a faster decision making and higher impact as well, because they really see the need. And then once that there's there's proof of impact in that business unit, then we find it a lot easier of a conversations to then connect with the L&D team and share, hey, this is the impact we've had. How can we support you in other ways, right? And so that's in our primary, go-to-market motion where we have our own content and we deliver it. That's what we've been doing. But as I mentioned, in our platform direction that we're going, I think the go-to-market, we're still experimenting different ways. I would say it's not yet in a place where like I say this is like definitely like the person that we go after. We've seen actually a lot of different archetypes be interested, ranging from like product sort of lead at a large learning company to like a senior executive in non-learning companies that needs to train their people, right? And so, or CEOs. But it does seem like, in the platform case, it's usually organizations where this is a C-suite priority. We get to engage them in the conversation with.
I think kind of, and thanks for expanding on that, but I think as kind of a closing question, I'm going to close with a couple of business questions that perhaps I should have asked earlier, but to kind of give an idea of where Sparkwise is at the moment. You've received seed funding, and what's your business stage at this moment?
Yeah, so we're at a stage where I think maybe the most productive way to describe the stage is where are we in sort of de-risking the major components to say, oh, you've really nailed product market fit, right? And we have a very high bar for product market fit. It's sort of the typical description you hear where like things are flying off the shelf, like growth is almost killing you, right? Like, so if that's a bar, I think where we are is, I think our product lands actually quite consistently now, right? Like people experience it, they think it's different and unique. Our learners have a great experience doing it. Obviously, there are constantly ways to improve it, but it's not where sort of we're beyond the curve of we have no idea what we're building. We definitely feel like we have the core thing that learners love. So on the product side, I think we're really in getting to a good spot. I think on the go-to-market side is where we have a core motion that works, that consistently gets us customers. But I actually see a more explosive path through the platform, which we've talked about a little bit. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how does this motion really work, right? And part of the reason why I really think about that is that if I look at the corporate learning space, it's a pretty crowded space in some sense, right? There are a lot of players. It's been around for decades. And direct go-to-market to corporates is seen as noisy. And I see that. And I see the ability to actually work with organizations that have existing distribution to a lot of companies and be able to support them to be successful in that process, for us to also be successful, as a really interesting and somewhat necessary way to grow very quickly. And so I think on the go-to-market side, we have something that's working. I see like a potentially even a better path, and we're trying to crack that. And I think when those two things really are at a stage where I'm like, yeah, we can put a check mark to those things, that's when you say, oh, we're really ready for like a turbocharged, like sort of fuel the growth situation. Until then, we're being quite scrappy. We're being careful with our spend and maximizing learning rather than growth.
Yeah. This makes total sense. Thanks a lot for being with me today, Vince. I'm looking forward to monitoring Sparkwise development. I'm sure you're up to great innovations in the well, corporate learning skills area. Yeah, thank you, and talk to you again soon.